Hello, my name is Ramona. I'm 66 years old, and I wish I could tell you that last Christmas was filled with warmth and family love. Instead, my own son shoved me away from the dinner table and said, "This chair belongs to the most important woman in my life, my wife. Go eat over there in the corner with your filthy mutt." In front of everyone, I felt myself shrink as if I'd suddenly become invisible. Buddy, my little corgi, nudged my leg as if to say he still saw me, even when no one else did. I swallowed the humiliation in silence, but what my son didn't know was that everything was about to change. Because the next morning, before the sun even rose, my phone lit up with 47 missed calls, and that was just the beginning. I'm sharing this now because maybe someone out there has felt that same sting, the betrayal that doesn't come from strangers, but from the people you love most. What happened after those 47 missed calls changed the entire course of our family forever. Secrets came out, lies unraveled, and for the first time in years, I found my voice again. You're not going to believe what happened next. But before we continue, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love reading every message and getting to know you. Now, let's uncover how this story truly began. I never imagined that humiliation could sting in a way that felt both ancient and freshly sharp, like a wound reopening after decades of healing. But that Christmas evening, sitting at my son David's long mahogany table, the one he liked to brag, was custom-made by an award-winning craftsman. I felt something quietly collapse inside me. Buddy, my loyal corgi, rested at my feet, warm and trusting. He always sensed my tension before I did. His ears twitched when David's voice cut across the room, loud enough for the crystal glasses to tremble on their stems. My son shoved me at the Christmas table, saying, "This chair belongs to the most important woman in my life, my wife. Go eat over there in the corner with your filthy mutt." I felt humiliated in front of the whole family, but what he didn't know was that I was about to change his life forever. The room fell painfully silent. Not the respectful kind, no, the brittle, uncomfortable kind where people stare at their plates and pretend they didn't witness cruelty dressed as confidence. Jessica smirked in that way she does when she thinks she's won the invisible game she's always playing. Her parents watched with glassy politeness, their faces stiff, but their eyes darting with the thrill of silent judgment. They never interfered. They never comforted. They existed in that polished world where appearances mattered more than compassion. I steadied myself on the back of the chair he'd denied me. My hands trembled despite my best efforts to appear composed, and I could feel Buddy's body press closer to my leg, as if he were bracing me. My sweet companion, always the one creature who never made me feel like a burden. I picked up my plate slowly, almost ritualistically, and walked to the dim corner near the back of the dining room. The smell of roasted turkey and cinnamon-glazed carrots drifted around me like a cruel reminder that this was supposed to be a family gathering filled with warmth, laughter, and gratitude, not humiliation. As I sat down, I caught a glimpse of Emma, an 8-year-old granddaughter, across the table. Her small hands were clenched around her napkin, knuckles white. Her lower lip trembled. She was trying so hard not to cry. It nearly shattered me. Because children shouldn't have to witness their father treating their grandmother like disposable clutter. They shouldn't learn cruelty as a blueprint for power. They shouldn't carry shame that doesn't belong to them. But Emma's eyes, glossy with tears she didn't dare shed, told me she already understood too much. I gave her a small smile, soft but steady, hoping she would draw courage from it. She blinked rapidly, then stared at her plate again. I knew she wanted to run to me. I also knew Jessica's hand under the table, thin, manicured, perfectly polished, was probably gripping her small wrist to keep her in place. The dinner continued with forced cheer, clinking forks, tight laughter, stolen glances. The kind of performance families give when they desperately want to seem normal. and every now and then I heard Jessica's hushed whisper into David's ear, followed by David's brittle chuckle. I sat quietly, eating almost nothing, listening to the heartbeat in my ears. Buddy rested his chin on my knee, offering the only kindness in the room. I kept reminding myself to breathe. Later that evening, after the charade of dessert and gift opening, I gathered Buddy's leash and made my way out. No one insisted I stay. No one asked if I needed help getting to my car. Only Emma, bless her tender souls, slipped me a small candy cane wrapped in a napkin. She whispered, "For you and Buddy," before Jessica yanked her away with a sharp look. In the car, I held the candy cane in my palm. My fingers closed around it like it was a lifeline. I whispered to Buddy, "Well, my love, I guess we're not wanted anymore." His tail thumped softly, trying to comfort me. When I got home, the apartment felt colder than usual. Maybe it was the December air sneaking through the old window frames, or maybe it was the loneliness settling into my bones. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, soaking in the silence. Then I picked up the phone. My voice shook when Mr. Patterson answered. He had been my late husband's lawyer, and one of the few people who had treated me with genuine respect since my husband passed. "Ramona, are you all right?" he asked, instantly sensing something was wrong. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I need to ask you about the trust, the one my husband left for David. The fund with the conditions," he said carefully. "Yes," I whispered. "Those conditions. I need to know. Does David know?" "Not yet, mister," Patterson replied. "He will learn on his 45th birthday." "In 3 days," I murmured, gripping the edge of the counter. 3 days. There was silence on his end, gentle silence, not judgmental. "Ramona," he said softly, "whatever happened tonight, the trust will enforce your husband's wishes. David cannot access a cent unless he fulfills the conditions." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. I didn't have the strength to describe what had happened at dinner. The shove, the words, the degradation, the way my son, my little boy who once cried when he scraped his knee, had looked at me like I was nothing. After hanging up, I sat on the couch, Buddy pressed tightly against my thigh. I stroked his fur, grounding myself in the warmth of another living being who didn't need me to pretend I was fine. When I finally checked my phone the next morning, it buzzed violently in my hand. 47 missed calls. David. Over and over and over. I stared at the screen, exhaling slowly. He called this much only when terrified, never when loving. Buddy jumped onto the couch and nudged my arm as if to say, "It's starting." Yes, it was starting. David had humiliated me publicly. But now he would learn the cost of disrespect, not because I wanted revenge, but because my late husband had trusted me to uphold the one boundary he believed would protect our family. I looked at Buddy and whispered, "Come on, my brave boy. Everything is about to change." David showed up at my apartment the next morning with the kind of urgency that didn't belong to a son worried for his mother. It belonged to a man worried for his money. I heard his hurried footsteps echo sharply in the hallway, that familiar heavy thumping he had even as a boy when he didn't get his way. Buddy sensed the tension before I did. He lifted his head from the rug, ears stiff, body alert. The pounding on my door shook the frame. "Mom! Open the door! Open it now!" I didn't rush. Not out of spite, just out of exhaustion. My heart was still tender from the night before, still recovering from being shoved aside like an unwanted burden. I poured myself the last of my lavender tea, letting the steam warm my face, anchoring me in something gentle before the storm came crashing in. When I unlocked the door, David pushed it open so hard it bumped my shoulder. His face was flush-tread in patches, like someone who had been shouting in his car before coming upstairs. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask if I was all right. He didn't even acknowledge Buddy, who stood between us like a tiny guardian with a deep, warning growl. "Mom!" David demanded, voice sharp enough to cut through the morning calm. "The bank called." They said there's a problem with Dad's inheritance. What did you tell them? I didn't flinch. Instead, I took a quiet sip of tea, letting the warm liquid soothe me. Buddy's growl deepened, a low rumble in his chest. David glared at him. "Stop that dog," he snapped. I gently placed my hand on Buddy's back. Buddy only growls when someone speaks to me like that. David rolled his eyes, annoyed, dismissive. "Mom, this is serious. They froze everything, everything. Jessica is losing her mind. The lake house, we already put in an offer." His voice cracked at the end, a sound I hadn't heard since he was a teenager, learning the cost of consequences for the first time. "Just tell me what you did." I set down my cup and looked at him with all the steadiness I could gather. "I didn't do anything," I said softly. "Your father did." David's brows pulled together. "What is that supposed to mean?" I inhaled slowly, carefully, because even now, after last night, after the shove, after the words that bruised me more than any physical force ever could, I didn't want to hurt him. I wanted him to understand. "Your father's trust," I said, "the $2, $8 million he left for you. It had one condition." David blinked. "A condition?" "Nobody told me about a condition. You weren't supposed to know until you turned 45, I explained gently. "The bank was scheduled to contact you next week." "What condition?" His voice went flat, monotone, but underneath I heard panic beginning to bloom. "What condition?" "That you treat me with respect," I whispered, "with dignity. That you treat me as family." For a moment, just a moment, I saw the boy he used to be. The one who brought me dandelions from the yard, who cried into my shoulder after nightmares, who promised he would always love me. His mouth opened slightly, as if he expected the world to snap back into place. But then his expression changed, hardened, like cement being poured over wet soil. "You can't do this," he whispered, then louder, "You can't do this. Jessica and I have plans. We're buying the lake house. We already put down a deposit." I felt my heart crumple at how invisibly I seemed to stand in his life, how easily his dreams excluded me entirely, how the things that mattered so deeply to me, kindness, family, understanding, had become obstacles in his world of status and image. I clasped my hands around my cup to stop them from trembling. "You still can have the trust," I said, "every penny." His head snapped up. "But only if you apologize for last night, publicly, and if you treat me like your mother, not an inconvenience." David stared at me as if I had spoken in an unfamiliar language. He shook his head slowly, disbelief and anger battling for dominance. "This is insane," he muttered. "Apologize? In front of people? Mom, you're making a scene out of nothing." "Nothing?" I repeated softly, feeling something inside me finally settle, like stones falling into place. "You shoved me. You told me to eat in a corner. You called Buddy filthy. You humiliated me in front of my granddaughter." David's jaw clenched. "It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that." He paced the length of my tiny living room, muttering under his breath about investments. Jessica's expectations, the lake house, his future, his plans, always his plans. Buddy tracked him with suspicious eyes, growling whenever David's voice rose. Finally, David grabbed his jacket and stormed toward the door. "This isn't over," he spat. "I'll fix this. I'll fix you. You're being manipulated or confused or whatever this is. It won't last." As he yanked the door open, I noticed something small but important. His hand reached up to the key hook near the entrance, where my spare apartment key hung. He slipped it into his pocket with the practiced ease of someone who thought they had every right to take what belonged to me. He didn't know I was watching. He didn't know that I saw everything now, every choice, every crack in the facade, every excuse. When the door slammed shut, Buddy jumped into my lap, shaking slightly. I wrapped my arms around him, my heart aching with a mother's grief, one that stretches deeper than anger, deeper than disappointment. It was the ache of losing a child who was still very much alive, hours passed. The afternoon light shifted into evening shadows. I tried to read, to distract myself, but unease crept into my mind like fog rolling in under a door. Something wasn't right. I could feel it. When I returned from walking Buddy after sunset, my stomach dropped. My apartment door was slightly open, just an inch, but enough. "David," I called into the silence, even though I already knew the truth. I stepped inside slowly. My living room had been torn apart, cushions slashed open, drawers pulled out. My closet doors flung wide. The smell of perfume bottles shattered on the floor stung the air. Buddy barked sharply, hackles raised. My jewelry box, the one my mother gave me when I turned 16, lay open on the bed, completely empty. Everything inside it was gone. David had come back, and he had taken everything he wanted, including the last pieces of my past. I stood in the middle of my ransacked apartment, my hands trembling so badly I had to brace them against the wall. Buddy whimpered at my feet, nudging my ankle as if urging me to breathe. The violation of the moment seeped into my skin like something cold and poisonous. My jewelry, the gifts from birthdays, anniversaries, quiet moments of love now long gone. Everything was gone. I dialed the police on reflex, though I already knew how this would go. There was a part of me still clinging to hope, to the belief that justice could be simple, that wrongs could be fixed by people who cared. But deep down, I suspected that nothing about this situation would be simple. 2 officers arrived first, took pictures, made notes, asked the standard questions. I answered as best I could, though my voice wavered more times than I wished it would. My hands wouldn't stay still. I kept pressing my fingertips together, grounding myself in the tiny pressure points. When Detective Sarah Miller walked in, something in the room shifted. She looked to be in her mid-40s, with calm eyes that had seen too much but were still capable of gentleness. There was an immediate stillness about her, as if she were the type of person who could walk into chaos and tilt it back toward order. She approached me slowly, offering a small, reassuring smile. "Mrs. Hill," she said softly, "I'm Detective Miller. I'm so sorry this happened to you. I'm going to take your statement personally, if that's all right." Her voice had warmth. It made me want to collapse and finally cry, but I stayed upright, pressing my nails into my palm to keep myself together. I told her everything about David's visit, his anger, the missing key, his desperate obsession with the trust. She wrote while I spoke, nodding occasionally, her expression unreadable but attentive. When we finished, she asked, "Do you know where your son was during the time frame of the break-in?" "Yes," I whispered. He made sure I'd know. He had texted me earlier that afternoon, not out of concern, but to remind me how busy he was closing year-end company reports. And when Detective Miller checked, his alibi came back spotless. He was at his office, recorded on multiple security cameras, greeting clients, talking on the phone, walking across the lobby at the exact time my apartment was being torn apart. A clean alibi. Too clean. I felt the sting in my eyes but refused to let tears fall. "People can hire others," Sarah murmured gently, "or ask others to help them." Buddy suddenly began barking, not at the officers, not at Sarah, but toward my bedroom. Sharp, insistent barks, the kind he only used when something was wrong and very wrong. Sarah straightened. "Is that normal for him?" "He barks at strangers," I said, "but this is different." She followed Buddy toward my room, her movements precise and alert. I trailed behind her, my breath catching when Buddy scratched at the closet door. Sarah opened it slowly. At first, I saw nothing but dresses and storage boxes. Then she crouched down, reached behind a stack of winter coats, and froze. "Mrs. Hill," she said, her voice suddenly firm, "did you place this here?" In her gloved hand was a small black device, no larger than a matchbox, with a tiny lens glinting in the dim closet light. A camera. My stomach lurched so violently I had to grip the doorframe. No," I whispered. "Oh God, no." Sarah held my gaze, steady and careful. This is a covert recording device. Someone hid it here intentionally. Weeks of feeling watched suddenly made sense. The odd sensation that I wasn't alone at night, the times I found things slightly moved, but convinced myself I was being forgetful. My skin prickled with shame, fear, and violation all at once. Sarah examined the device closely. If it was transmitting anywhere, I can trace it. Serial numbers usually give me a place to start. She bagged it carefully and stepped into the living room, pulling up a database on her tablet. I stood with my arms wrapped tight around myself, Buddy pressed against my leg like he sensed I was unraveling. A minute passed, then 2. Suddenly, Sarah's eyes sharpened. There it is. My heart thudded. The device was ordered online, she said slowly, shipped to an address under the name Jessica Holloway. She looked up. Is that a name you recognize? My breath left me. Yes, that's Jessica, David's wife. Holloway is her maiden name. Sarah exhaled. Do you know what she does for work? She's in tech, I whispered, memories flooding back. We never talk much, but David mentioned she has security expertise, something about systems, access controls, encryption. I never really understood the details. Sarah nodded grimly. Then she knew exactly what she was doing. Before I could process the weight of that, there was a hesitant knock on my open doorframe. It was Mrs. Chun from across the hall, her gray hair pulled back in a bun, her warm eyes filled with worry. Oh dear, she said softly, stepping closer. I saw the officers and thought I should check on you. Her gaze moved to Sarah, then back to me. I didn't want to bother you earlier, but I should tell you. I saw Jessica last Tuesday. She was standing near your door. I assumed she was visiting. My mouth went dry. She doesn't visit, I whispered. Mrs. Chan frowned, then her eyes widened as realization dawned. Then why was she here? Sarah wrote the note quickly, her brows drawn tight. Everything connected now. The key that disappeared, the camera, David's perfect alibi, Jessica's technical ability, her presence outside my door. A cold, hollow ache settled in my chest. My own son's wife had been watching me. Watching my movements, my routines, my vulnerabilities. Watching me grieve, watching me sleep. Something inside me broke. But amid the breaking, something else, small and quiet, began to strengthen. A thread of resolve pulling itself together in the ruins. David called later that night. His name lit up my phone screen like a warning. I answered with a softness that tasted like surrender. Mom? He said, voice coated with a false tenderness. I heard the police were there. I just wanted to check on you. I swallowed the bitter taste in my mouth and whispered, I'm shaken. I don't know what to do. A silence of satisfaction slipped between his breaths. That's why I'm calling, he said quietly. Let me handle things. Don't talk to anyone else, please. You're confused and scared. I'll come by tomorrow. I murmured a shaky acknowledgement, letting him believe I was fragile and broken. But Detective Miller was sitting beside me, listening. We had a plan now. A trap. Are you sure you want to do this? Sarah asked softly, after I hung up. I nodded, wiping a tear that wasn't fully sadness anymore. It was something sharper, clearer. They think I'm weak, I whispered. Let them. Together, we placed a new folder on my kitchen table, a perfectly crafted bait. Inside, it was a forged document detailing a second trust fund worth $5 million, supposedly accessible only to me. We set it where any intruder would find it. A quiet challenge. A silent invitation. A test of greed and guilt. Buddy curled beside me, watching the folder with curious eyes, as if sensing that everything in my life was about to shift again. And somewhere inside me, amid fear and heartbreak, a new kind of strength began to rise. I didn't expect the trap to spring so quickly. By early morning, Detective Sarah Miller sent me a text with a single line. She took the bait. When I opened the footage on my phone, my stomach tightened. There was Jessica, calm, calculated, moving through my small apartment like she owned every inch. She didn't hesitate, didn't even look around nervously. She simply walked straight to the folder on my desk, opened it, and lifted her phone to photograph every single page of the fake $5 million secondary trust document we had planted. She even smiled while doing it. A small, satisfied smile, like someone who had finally found the last missing piece of a puzzle she'd been building for a long time. It hurt seeing her move with such confidence in a place I sleep, cook, cry, breathe. Seeing her treat my life like nothing more than a stepping stone. But it also strengthened something in me. A quiet resolve I didn't know survived under the layers of exhaustion and hurt. Later that day, I walked Buddy to Emma's school. It was supposed to be part of my routine with the therapy dog program. Children petting him, learning kindness and calmness. I expected the familiar laughter and gentle shyness, but when Emma saw me at the door, she froze. Her backpack slipped off her shoulder and hit the floor. She rushed into my arms so quickly I nearly lost my balance. "Grandma." Her voice cracked in a way I had never heard before. She was trembling. Buddy pressed himself against her legs protectively, sensing something raw and fragile breaking open inside her. I knelt down so we were face to face. Tears streamed down her cheeks, and she wiped them away with the back of her small hand, embarrassed, as if she needed to be strong for me. "You don't have to hide anything," I whispered. She inhaled shakily, then whispered back, "Daddy and Mommy fight about money every night. Mommy says, you're holding them back. She says, you don't deserve anything." The words struck like cold water. Not because I didn't expect cruelty from Jessica by now. I did, but because Emma had been hearing it, absorbing it, carrying it inside her little chest like a weight she didn't know how to name. I stroked her hair and tried to steady my voice. "Sweetheart, none of that is your fault." She sniffled, then reached into her backpack. I need to show you something." She pulled out her iPad and handed it to me. On the screen were messages, long threads of them between Jessica and someone saved only as RC. My pulse quickened as I scrolled. "She's not backing down. We need a faster strategy. The old woman is slowing everything. If we get rid of her influence, David will follow our plan." Each line felt colder than the last. Not a single message mentioned Emma. Not her well-being. Not her safety. Only money. Power. Control. "Emma, who's RC?" I asked softly. She shrugged, but her expression showed she'd wondered too. "Mommy hides the messages when I'm around. I only saw them because she forgot to close the window." That night, I asked a favor from Emma's friend, Liam Smart. Quiet. One of those kids who could practically rewire a computer with his eyes closed. He typed silently for a few minutes, his face illuminated by the bright screen, then turned the tablet toward me. "RC stands for Robert Chun," he said. "This is his old linked account. He used to run a startup with your daughter-in-law." A strange chill ran through me. Jessica had mentioned him once, years ago, an ex-boyfriend she stayed friendly with. I hadn't thought much of it. But now the pieces slid into place with sickening clarity. Robert Chun, tech entrepreneur, security specialist. The one person who would know exactly how to plant cameras, wipe tracks, and manipulate digital footprints. And Jessica still spoke to him. Not about work, not about catching up, but about getting rid of the old woman's influence. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Later that night, as I searched through the wreckage of my ransacked dresser, something caught my eye. My jewelry box had been shoved back into place, not where I found it before, but slightly misaligned, as if someone had returned it hastily. I opened it expecting emptiness, but instead, tucked beneath the false bottom, I found papers that didn't belong to me. Medical documents, mental health evaluations, signatures forged poorly, but enough to fool someone who wasn't looking closely. Forms suggesting I had shown signs of confusion, early dementia, erratic behavior. Records claiming I had wandered into traffic last month. Statements supposedly from a caregiver I'd never met. My stomach twisted, and the room blurred for a moment. They had already started. The plan wasn't theoretical anymore. Jessica and Robert had planted evidence to declare me mentally incompetent. That way, they could seize control of the trust. Everything made sense. The camera, the staged break-in, the stolen items returned with new additions, the messages. They weren't just humiliating me. They were building a case. Buddy nudged my thighs, sensing the panic building in my chest. His warmth grounded me. I sank onto the bed, clutching the papers. When my phone rang, I almost didn't answer. But David's name flashed across the screen. I let the silence stretch a few seconds before picking up. Hello? His voice came quietly at first, almost rehearsed. Mom, we need to talk about getting you some help. Some help. The phrase was a blade wrapped in cotton. I swallowed. What kind of help, David? He sighed as if the burden of pretending to care weighed on him. Jessica told me you were wandering around confused last week. She said you forgot where you parked, that you called her twice, repeating the same. I didn't call her. I cut in gently. Not once. He paused. I could almost hear the conflict inside him, the part that still remembered me as his mother, and the part Jessica had wrapped her fingers around. Mom, please, don't make this harder. My hand tightened around the forged documents resting on my lap. My voice remained soft. David, sweetheart, are you sure the person who's confused here is me? Another pause. A long exhale. Then the coldness returned. We'll talk tomorrow, he muttered, and hung up. Buddy lifted his head, ears perking, as if asking whether I was all right. I leaned into his fur and let the exhaustion spill out of me, trembling with a mixture of betrayal and fierce, burning resolve. They thought they were closing in. But Detective Sarah and I had already begun turning the ground beneath their feet into a trap of our own. Let them come, I whispered into Buddy's fur. This time, I'm ready. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake with Buddy curled at my feet. The forged medical documents spread across my nightstand like pieces of a nightmare I hadn't fully woken from. Every few minutes, I would reach down and rest my hand on Buddy's back, grounding myself in the steady rise and fall of his breathing. It reminded me that I wasn't alone, even when the people who were supposed to love me had turned into something unrecognizable. By morning, Detective Sarah Miller picked me up and drove me to Mr. Patterson's office. She didn't say much, but she kept glancing at me from time to time, as if making sure I wouldn't unravel in the passenger seat. I appreciated the quiet companionship. Sometimes silence speaks louder than reassurance. When we entered Patterson's office, he stood immediately. His silver hair was slightly mussed, his glasses perched on the tip of his nose, and the deep lines in his face seemed even more carved than usual. He was holding a thick folder, thicker than anything I expected, and when he gestured for us to sit, there was a heaviness in his movements that made my stomach tighten. We have enough evidence now, he began. Fraud, attempted elder abuse, conspiracy to commit financial exploitation. Jessica and whoever she's working with have built quite a web. He tapped the folder. You've done the right thing by coming forward early. I nodded, but something in his voice didn't match the moment. It wasn't victory, it wasn't relief, it was hesitation. I felt my palms grow cold. Mr. Patterson, what is it? You're holding something back. He removed his glasses, cleaned them with a small cloth, then slid them back on, not for clarity, but to avoid looking at me. There is something else you need to know before we proceed. My heart thudded. Buddy whined quietly at my feet, sensing the shift in my breathing. Go on, I whispered. Patterson opened the folder and pulled out a single sheet of marriage certificate. At first, I didn't grasp what I was looking at. Then I saw the names, and everything inside me froze solid, like winter settling into my bones. Jessica Thompson and Robert Chun married in Clark County, Nevada, Patterson said quietly. 3 years ago. I blinked. Once. Twice. The room tilted and I had to grip the arm of my chair. That can't. She married David 2 years ago. Yes, Patterson replied, his voice firm but gentle. Which means that marriage is invalid. Legally void. The assets she and David share, everything with her name on it, is now questionable. Sarah exhaled sharply next to me. So the entire thing was planned from the start. She married Robert, kept her name off public records, targeted David, and now she's been living a double life, Patterson finished. I felt something shatter quietly inside. Not a dramatic break, but the quiet crumble of something I had hoped wasn't true. David didn't know, I said softly. My son. He's foolish. He's angry. But he isn't cruel enough to be part of something like this. He can't know. Sarah nodded. He probably doesn't. That's exactly why they're pushing so hard to make you appear incompetent. If he ever saw this. She tapped the certificate. The spell would break. Spell, yes, that was the right word. Jessica had wrapped him in something, charm, fear, manipulation, I didn't know, but it held him by the throat. I swallowed hard. We need more, something undeniable. We got more, Sarah said softly. And it's not good. She slid a new file in front of me. Inside were photocopies, screenshots, a printed email chain. At the top was a name, Jennifer Marks. That's Jessica's real name, Sarah said, before she ever met your son. My fingers trembled slightly as I turned the pages. Each one cut deeper, a widower in Colorado, a large estate, a life insurance payout. Jennifer, had presented herself as a caregiver hired to help the man after a surgery. She gained his trust, manipulated him, extracted $400,000, and then, right when the daughter began asking questions, she vanished. The daughter's name was written on a sticky note attached to the file. I called her that same afternoon. Her voice shook as she spoke, bitterness and grief woven together in every syllable. When she emailed me her file, the one she'd kept all these years, it confirmed everything. The same patterns, the same tactics, the same charm turned poison. Be careful, she warned me at the end. If she feels cornered, she doesn't lash out. She disappears. And she takes whatever she can carry. When I closed my laptop after the call, I felt the room spinning. Not from confusion, but from clarity. The kind of clarity that steals your breath. Emma, my sweet granddaughter. The only innocence left in the middle of this storm. If David discovered the truth before we could secure everything, if he confronted Jessica without understanding what she really was, she could flee. Flee with their accounts. With anything in his name. With anything tied to the community fund. And worst of all, she could take Emma with her. The thought nearly knocked me off my feet. I stood, grabbed my coat, and clipped Buddy's leash on with shaking hands. We headed straight to David's office. The corporate building stood tall and glassy, polished and cold, much like the version of my son I had come to know these past 2 years. I walked through the lobby, ignoring the receptionist's hesitant greeting. Buddy trotted beside me, alert, tense, as if he knew we were walking into danger. David's door was open just enough for me to see him inside, leaning over paperwork, brow furrowed. For a moment, I saw the boy he used to be. The one who would panic if I was 5 minutes late picking him up from school. The one who used to bring me broken toys to fix with tape and glue. Then he looked up, and that softness disappeared. Mom, what are you doing here? I didn't answer right away. I walked in, closed the door behind me, and took out the certificate. We need to talk. He sighed loudly, rubbing his temples. If this is about yesterday, it's about your wife, I said softly. He flinched at the word, and I knew he felt it. Something deep inside him knew things weren't right. Knew they hadn't been right for a long time. I laid the paper on his desk and stepped back so he could read it. He scanned it quickly, then scoffed with a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "Oh my God, Mom!" He pushed the certificate back toward me. "That's fake." "No, David," I said quietly. "It isn't." He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, eyebrows raised. "Jessica told me you might try something like this. She said you were desperate, that you were angry about the inheritance and the conditions." "I'm angry because you're in danger," I whispered. "And so is Emma." He blinked at me, a flicker of something uncertain before shaking his head again. "Mom, please, stop. I can't handle this right now." But I saw it. The flash in his eyes. The fear behind the dismissal. The truth trying to claw its way up through layers of denial. Buddy stepped forward, resting his head against David's knee. A small, instinctive gesture. David's hand hovered, almost petting him. Then he pulled away. "I don't believe you," he said finally. "I won't." And just like that, he turned his face away from me toward a lie he wasn't ready to stop loving. I stood there in the silence, my heart breaking with the soft sound of something fragile giving way. "This isn't about belief," I said quietly. "This is about the truth catching up." But he didn't look at me. Not yet. Emma arrived at my door just after sunset, the hallway lights behind her casting a faint glow around her small frame. She looked so tiny with her backpack slung over one shoulder, the straps shaking slightly as her hands trembled. The moment Buddy saw her, he barked once sharp, alert, then softened, pressing himself against her legs like a living shield. She didn't even bend down to greet him. Instead, she pushed past the doorway and wrapped her arms around me so tightly it took my breath. "Grandma." Her voice cracked, brittle as thin ice. "I heard them talking. Mommy said she's leaving Dad," she said. "She's taking everything this weekend." The words spilled out in fragments, each one heavier than the last. I guided her inside gently, closing the door behind us while Buddy stayed glued to her side, watching her with those solemn eyes that always seemed to know more than a dog should. She sat on my couch, hugging her backpack to her chest, as if afraid someone might rip it away. I knelt in front of her, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "You're safe here. No one is going to take you anywhere you don't want to go. Tell me exactly what you heard." She swallowed hard, eyes darting to the window as if expecting Jessica's face to appear in the glass. "Mommy was on the phone. She thought I was asleep. She said, she's done pretending. She said she'll take Dad's accounts, the company stuff, the savings, everything. Then she said she and Robert are leaving by Saturday." She sounded happy, like it was a game. Her lips quivered and she pressed them tight, trying so hard not to break. Buddy nudged her shoulder with his nose, and she finally let herself sob, sinking into him as though he were the only steady thing left in her world. I wrapped my arms around both of them, feeling Emma's small body tremble against me. Once she calmed enough to breathe normally, I reached for my phone. My hands weren't as steady as I wanted them to be. The betrayal, the fear for Emma, the urgency, it all pressed against my ribs like a vice. I dialed Tom, David's business partner, praying he would pick up. He answered on the fourth ring. "Ramona? Everything all right?" I stepped into the kitchen, lowering my voice. "Tom, Emma overheard something. Jessica's planning to leave this weekend. She's taking everything she can. I need to know. Did David really sign over his share of the company?" There was a long silence, then a sigh that felt like defeat. "Yes, last month. Jessica said it was for tax restructuring," David insisted. He said she understood finances better than he did. He paused, and I could hear papers rustling on his desk. "Ramona." I knew something was off, but I didn't expect this. I pressed a hand to my forehead, leaning against the counter. "Tom, listen to me. She's leaving him, and she's taking everything. Everything he signed away." "Jesus." His voice dropped. "Tell me what you need." And so the alliance formed, not out of strategy, but out of shared disbelief, heartbreak, and urgency. Within an hour, Tom sat in my living room, his face pale. Detective Sarah Miller arrived shortly after, wearing that calm, controlled expression that masked the storm beneath. Mr. Patterson joined us last, carrying a briefcase stuffed with documents, printouts, and copies of everything we had uncovered about Jessica Jennifer Marks, whatever name she was using at any given moment. Emma sat quietly beside Buddy, her head resting on his side, the exhaustion of too much fear weighing down her eyelids. Every time someone raised their voice, even slightly, she flinched. "We don't have time," Sarah said, standing in the center of the room. "If Jessica is leaving by Friday, we need her admitting her crimes before then, preferably sooner." Patterson adjusted his glasses, flipping open a folder. "We already have fraud, bigamy, attempted exploitation of a vulnerable adult, and conspiracy. But without an admission tying all of it together, her intent, her connection to Robert, to risk her slipping away before charges stick." Tom rubbed his hands over his face. "She's dangerous. Not physically, but in every other way that counts." I looked down at Emma, at Buddy curled protectively around her legs, and something inside me hardened. A quiet, resolute determination replaced the fear. "So we get her to tell the truth, all of it, out loud." Sarah nodded slowly. "You're willing to wear a wire?" "Yes." Tom flinched. "Ramona, are you sure?" I knew the risks. I also knew what would happen if we didn't act now. If I don't stop her, she'll take everything, including the piece of that child sitting on my couch. And so, we set the plan. It felt surreal hearing Sarah explain how the microphone would be hidden, how the receiver would stay with her in an unmarked van, how I only needed to speak naturally, gently, letting Jessica reveal herself. The thought of being alone with that woman made my stomach twist, but there was no room for second thoughts now. The next afternoon, I called Jessica. "Hi," I said, making my voice small, fragile. I wanted to apologize for causing trouble." She took the bait instantly. "Lunch tomorrow?" Her tone dripped with false sweetness. "I think it would be good for us to clear the air." "Good. Perfect." The next day, wearing the wire beneath my blouse, I sat across from her at a cafe I had chosen specifically, quiet, open, with no chance for her to slip away unnoticed. She arrived in a fitted black coat, sunglasses still on, though we were indoors. She looked confident, almost triumphant. "Ramona," she said, taking her seat. "I'm glad you came." I folded my hands in front of me. I just want to understand." Her smile sharpened. "You never stood a chance, Ramona. You think David listens to you? He hasn't for years. He's so desperate for approval he'll sign anything you put in front of him. It's almost pathetic." The words stung, but I forced myself to nod, playing the part. I didn't know." "Of course you didn't. You're predictable. That's why this was easy." "Jessica, did you ever really love my son?" She laughed, a short, cruel sound. "Love? No. But he was useful." She leaned back, crossing her legs. "And now it's time to cash out." I let my fingertips tremble slightly, as if overwhelmed. "And Robert? Are you two still?" She smirked. "Still married? Obviously. That idiot David never checked. Robert and I have done this 4 times, Ramona. 4. Wealthy men, lonely, insecure. Your son's just the richest mark yet." My heart pounded, but my voice stayed steady. "And the money? Oh, don't worry. By Friday, the $3.2 million will be safely transferred. And then—" She tilted her head, smiling almost sweetly. "We disappear." Every word dripped into the microphone beneath my blouse. Every word carried through to Sarah, to Tom, to Patterson, all listening from the van parked down the street. I felt my breath catch not in fear, but in something else. Relief. Justice forming, inch by inch. Jessica had just destroyed herself, and she didn't even know it. The morning the FBI arrived, the air in Patterson's office felt heavier than usual. as if the walls themselves understood something enormous was about to happen. Their badges gleamed under the fluorescent lights, symbols of authority that should have made me feel safe, yet instead filled me with a trembling mix of dread and relief. Interstate fraud, bigamy, elder abuse conspiracy. Words that didn't feel real yet were now part of the story of my life. Detective Sarah Miller stood beside them, calm but alert, her eyes scanning every corner of the room, like she expected danger to ripple out of the walls. When she turned to me, her voice softened. "This is the part where things become very real. Are you ready?" I nodded, though my throat felt tight. I've been ready for a long time, I just didn't know it. The plan was cruel in its necessity. A staged breakdown. A performance of desperation, convincing enough to coax monsters out of their shadows. So I dialed my son. When David picked up, his voice was surprisingly gentle, the tone he used when he was 10 years old and afraid I'd leave the hallway light off. "Mom? Is everything okay?" You sound bad," I forced a whimper, letting my breath shake. "David, I can't do this fighting anymore. I don't want the family torn apart because of money. I'll sign everything over. The trust, the house, whatever she wants. I just want peace." There was a pause, a long one. "Jessica should be there," he finally said. "She wants to help settle this. She thinks you misunderstand her." His voice cracked slightly, as if even he had begun to hear the rehearsed hollowness in the words he'd repeated for years. Of course she wanted to be there, and she would not come alone. When Jessica arrived at Patterson's office later that afternoon, she wore confidence like a tailored coat. Her smile was too bright, too fixed, the kind that always made my stomach tighten with an unnamed unease. Beside her stood Robert, now posing as her lawyer, though the suit he wore fit him like an afterthought, and the cheap briefcase in his hand looked borrowed. "Such a shame we have to do this," Jessica said, brushing invisible lint from her sleeve. "But it's for the best, isn't it? Families shouldn't fight over finances." Her voice dripped with false concern. Robert nodded stiffly, clearing his throat. Yes. Let's just resolve this quickly." David looked torn, standing slightly behind her, his hands in his pockets like he wasn't sure if he was supposed to smile or frown. He kept glancing at me, then away again, as though he was afraid of what he might see. Patterson guided us into the conference room, neutral, clean, walls lined with framed diplomas. It looked ordinary, unassuming that every corner was fitted with discreet cameras installed just hours earlier. I sat at the long wooden table, my hands trembling just enough to look fragile, my voice soft enough to seem defeated. Jessica leaned toward Robert as soon as she thought no one could hear. "Once she signs, we can hit the bank today. The old woman's finally breaking." Her whisper slithered through the room. Robert murmured back, "Make sure she doesn't back out. We've waited too long." My stomach twisted. Even knowing this was part of the trap, hearing their voices, cold, greedy, intimately familiar with the idea of stripping me of everything, felt like a blade against my ribs. Detective Sarah, hidden in the monitoring room, spoke into her radio. "We've got them. Keep it rolling." Jessica pushed the papers toward me, her nails tapping in impatience. "You just sign here, Ramona. It'll all be over." I stared at the signature line, at the neat space where my name would have given them the key to everything. My pen hovered as I waited for the signal, but I didn't need Sarah's voice. The moment arrived on its own. Jessica nudged Robert. "Get it ready. She's too emotional to notice if something's off. Let's finish this." That was enough. The conference room door burst open so forcefully that the air seemed to ripple. "Federal agents." The words cracked through the room like thunder. Jessica jerked backward, her face draining of color. Robert froze mid-reach, the forged document still in his hand, his mouth falling open in a silent gasp. Sarah strode in behind the FBI, her expression steeled, her voice firm. "Jessica Morrison, Robert Chun, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud. identity manipulation, financial exploitation, and attempted forgery. The room erupted. "No, no," Jessica screeched as agents grabbed her wrists. She twisted like a trapped animal. "This isn't real, it's entrapment. I was helping her. She asked us to come?" Robert swore under his breath, but he didn't fight. He just closed his eyes as if he had expected this moment all along. David stepped forward, panic lighting his face. "Stop! Stop! You don't understand." He pointed toward Jessica, voice cracking. "She's being set up. Mom, tell them. You've always been jealous of her." His words hit me harder than any betrayal could. Even now, even here. He defended her. "David," I whispered, my voice breaking, "please, please look at what's happening." Sarah nodded to Tom, who stepped into the room holding a tablet. He didn't speak. He simply pressed play. The security footage from Christmas filled the screen. Jessica whispering instructions. Robert lurking near the hallway, their hands moving through my things, their expressions unmistakably calculating. Another clip showed Emma, my sweet neighbor, speaking shakily into the camera, describing how she'd seen Jessica slipping around my building at night. Another clip showed the hidden camera removed from my closet. Another showed Jessica laughing with Robert about how gullible old people can be. David's face slowly crumbled as every illusion he had clung to for years began to dissolve. His eyes darted frantically between the screen and the real Jessican as cuffed, screaming obscenities, calling him useless, calling me pathetic, calling everyone idiots. It was the first time David truly heard her voice for what it was. He dropped to his knees as though someone cut his strings. His hands shook violently as he covered his face. "Mom! Oh God! Mom! I didn't know! I didn't know!" His sobs were raw, guttural, the kind that come from the breaking point of a soul. And despite everything, despite the months of humiliation, despite the fear he helped create, my heart twisted painfully, because I could see the truth buried under all his terrible choices. He had loved her, blindly, desperately, completely, and she had used him. Watching him crumble wasn't triumph. It was tragedy. I stepped toward him, my eyes stinging. "David." He didn't look up. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't see. I didn't want to see. She told me you were controlling, paranoid, jealous." His shoulders shook. "Mom, I was protecting the wrong person." I reached out, hesitating only a moment before letting my fingers brush his shoulder. "You were manipulated," I whispered. "It doesn't excuse everything, but I understand." The agents pulled Jessica and Robert out of the room, their protests fading down the hallway. What remained was silence, heavy, broken, human. David lifted his face, eyes red, voice hoarse. "Can you ever forgive me?" I didn't answer yet. Healing would come, but not instantly, not in this room heavy with betrayal. Instead, I knelt beside him, feeling the same ache I felt the first time he scraped his knee as a child. Not anger, not victory, just a mother holding the shattered pieces of her son's world. And somewhere deep inside, beneath all the hurt, a small spark of hope flickered, painful, fragile, but alive. Because even after all of this, there was room for rebuilding, room for truth. Room for a future that wouldn't be built on lies. And maybe, just maybe, room for us. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and old paper, a strange mixture of history and judgment, of stories that ended and others that began with a single sentence. I sat quietly on the witness bench, my hands folded in my lap, Buddy curled at my feet. His warm little body pressed against my ankle like a living anchor. Every few minutes he looked up as if checking to see whether I was still breathing. And in a way, he was the reason I kept breathing through the heaviness of it all. Jessica sat across the room, her hair pulled back sharply, her face washed of the charm she once weaponized so easily. Robert sat beside her, his shoulders sagging, eyes darting anywhere but toward me. They no longer looked like the polished pair they pretended to be, the ones who had whispered lies into my son's ears and poisoned the foundation of my family. They looked small now, fragile even. But cruelty is rarely grand once the mask falls away. When the judge called my name, Buddy lifted his head and followed me with nervous steps, his toenails clicking softly on the floor. The bailiff raised an eyebrow but said nothing. He'd already been told that Buddy was my support animal, my companion, my witness to every tremor in my heart these last months. I took the stand, placed my hand on the Bible, and felt the weight of truth settle over me. "Do you swear?" "I do," I whispered. My voice trembled as I described the fear that had crept into my home, the hidden camera, the forged documents, the deception that grew like mold in corners I hadn't known to check. I spoke about the humiliation at Christmas, the intimidation, the manipulation that eroded my relationship with my own son. I tried to stay steady, but certain moments cracked through David's blind loyalty to Jessica. The way she'd smirked when she thought I was breaking, the small flickers of hope I'd held on to anyway. Buddy nudged my foot with his nose when my voice shook too hard, a reminder that breathing was still possible, that I wasn't alone. When I stepped down, the courtroom felt oddly silent, as if everyone was holding their breath. Then they called Emma. My sweet neighbor walked slowly to the stand, her hands trembling, but her chin lifted with a courage I hadn't fully realized she possessed. Her voice was soft, quivering at first, but soon studied with something like quiet outrage. "I saw Jessica at Ramona's building," she said, more than once, late at night. "I heard the things she said about Ramona, the way she made David doubt her. No one deserves that kind of emotional abuse. Ramona didn't imagine any of it. She didn't exaggerate. She survived them." The jury watched her with a kind of stunned stillness. Sometimes the simplest truth carries the most undeniable weight. Her testimony sealed the fate that had been circling Jessica and Robert long before today. The verdict came after only 3 hours. Guilty, on all charges. 7 years. Fraud. Bigamy. Conspiracy. Jessica's mouth fell open in shock, as if she believed the world owed her another chance. Robert stared at the floor, shoulders shaking, not from remorse, but from the terror he had always tried to outrun. For a brief moment, I felt nothing, just a strange, hollow quiet. Justice does not always arrive with triumph. Sometimes it arrives with exhaustion. But there was no relief in David's face. While Jessica was led away in cuffs, he sat in the back of the courtroom, staring at his hands like he didn't recognize them. His business, once so proudly flaunted across social media, had collapsed almost overnight. Clients fled, partners terminated contracts. His reputation had curdled into a cautionary tale. And his daughter, my granddaughter, had been left shaken and confused, asking frightening questions no child her age should ever need to ask. I thought he would run from me, hide from the truth the way he had hidden from so many things these last few years. But he didn't. 3 days later, he knocked on my apartment door. When I opened it, he stood there looking like a man stripped of everything but honesty. His expensive clothes were gone, his hair unstyled, his shoulders bent as though each breath cost effort. "Mom." His voice broke before he could finish my name. I wanted to hate him for what he allowed to happen, for the cruelty he overlooked, the abuse he enabled, the blindness he embraced, because it was easier than questioning the woman he thought he loved. But standing there, he looked so much like the boy who once clung to my hand at the grocery store, afraid to lose sight of me, a boy who had never truly recovered from losing his father. He swallowed hard and whispered, "I don't deserve forgiveness. I chose her over you. I let her turn me into someone I'm ashamed of." His eyes glistened, and when he looked at me, it wasn't the defensive, angry son who had yelled at me months ago. It was a man stripped bare, A man finally seeing himself clearly, maybe for the first time in years. "Mom," he whispered again, "I'm sorry." Something inside me shifted. Not healed, not yet, but softened. For the first time since his father died, I truly looked at my son. Not through the lens of disappointment or fear or grief, but with a clarity unhindered by hope or denial. He hadn't become greedy for the sake of greed. He hadn't chased status to feed pride. He had been trying, foolishly, painfully, to fill a void carved into him the day he watched his father's casket lower into the ground. Approval felt like love to him. Wealth felt like safety. Jessica had offered both in a polished smile and a clever lie. He never stood a chance. I stepped aside and let him in. The air between us felt fragile, like lace stretched too thin. We sat on the couch hesitantly, awkwardly. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't cold. It was wounded. Finally, I placed my hand gently over his. "You humiliated me," I said quietly. He flinched but didn't pull away. "You broke my heart in ways I never want to relive." I took a breath, steadying the sting. "But you're still my son." His face crumpled, and he covered his mouth with his hand, sobbing, really sobbing, the way he hadn't allowed himself to since he was a child. And then Buddy trotted over, tail wagging slowly, sensing the rawness in the room. He pressed his warm little paw against David's knee, looking up with those round, knowing eyes that seemed to see the soul's bruises. David let out a broken laugh through his tears and whispered, "Even he forgives me?" I stroked Buddy's head and felt something inside my chest ease for the first time in months. "Animals always know," I murmured. And as David leaned down to hold Buddy, I watched the smallest flicker of healing begin, quiet, tender, and profoundly human. Not all wounds close easily, but some begin with a single touch, a single moment of truth. And this felt like the first step toward home. The first morning David and Emma moved into my apartment, the hallway felt smaller than usual, almost shy about accommodating so much change. Boxes stacked against the wall, taped unevenly, some dented, some half open with clothes spilling out. Emma clutched her backpack like a shield, her eyes red, her breath shaky. David stood behind her, defeated but trying to appear composed, the weight of his mistakes settling on him in visible layers. "Grandma, is it really okay if we stay here?" Emma asked. Her voice was small, hopeful, but trembling under the surface. I knelt beside her, smoothing a stray curl behind her ear. "Sweetheart, you are safe here. Both of you are. As long as you need." Buddy barked once, sharp, cheerful, decisive. It was as if he had declared, "Yes, this is home now." Emma dropped her backpack and immediately wrapped her arms around him. He leaned into her, gently, almost protectively. From that moment on, he followed her everywhere. The kitchen, the balcony, even waiting outside the bathroom door. It was as if he sensed the cracks in her spirit and decided that he would be the glue. Those early days were quiet in a way grief often demands. Emma moved slowly, her laughter cautious, but beginning to return in tiny pieces. David tried to be helpful, washing dishes, assembling furniture, fixing things that weren't broken simply because he needed to feel useful. He apologized constantly, sometimes in whispers when he thought I couldn't hear. I saw his shame, and his longing, and his exhaustion. They had lost the house, swallowed up by legal fees, restitution, and debts Jessica had left like landmines David hadn't noticed until they exploded beneath them. Emma tried to pretend she didn't care, but sometimes I would find her curled up in the corner of the living room with her drawing tablet, sketching her old bedroom in the colors she remembered. Buddy would gently place his head on her knee as she drew, grounding her. To help her heal, I enrolled Buddy in official therapy dog training. Emma insisted on coming to every session, holding the leash with the seriousness of a tiny soldier. She practiced commands with him in the evenings, using treats and soft praise. She would whisper, "Good boy, Buddy," You help people feel safe, as if reassuring herself in the process. Meanwhile, I made a decision, a quiet one, but firm. I used part of the trust not to rescue David, but to give him a chance to stand again. I invested in restarting his business. But this time, Tom's steady, loyal, honest Tom B became the majority partner. David didn't argue. He didn't even flinch. He just nodded, grateful, humbled, and determined to do things right. He spent his days rebuilding his reputation client by client, accepting small jobs that paid almost nothing, but meant everything. He stopped wearing tailored suits. He stopped trying to impress anyone. He simply worked, quietly, consistently, with a sincerity I hadn't seen in him since he was young. At night, our little apartment filled with the sounds of family again chopping vegetables, oil sizzling in pans, the clink of plates, Emma humming as she set the table, Buddy circling our feet hoping to catch a fallen carrot. These weren't grand dinners, not like the ones David had once thrown to impress investors or Jessica's shallow friends. These were soft dinners, honest dinners, meals seasoned with forgiveness and quiet gratitude. Sometimes we ate spaghetti in mismatched bowls. Sometimes chicken soup with more noodles than broth, because that's the way Emma liked it. And sometimes we ate breakfast for dinner just because Emma asked and Buddy wagged his tail as if he approved. One evening, without warning, David opened his social media app and typed a long post. I watched from the couch, unsure whether I should leave him to his thoughts or sit beside him. He finally hit post and exhaled, shaky. I told the truth, he said quietly. About everything. What Jessica did. What I ignored. What I enabled. He swallowed hard, staring at the screen. I don't want to hide anymore. His words spread faster than he expected. Shares, comments, tears from strangers, support from people he had never met. Within days, his confession reached over 3 million views. And with that visibility came messages from people across the country, victims of Jessica, or Jennifer Marks, or one of the aliases she had used. One man sent evidence of losing his retirement savings to her. A woman sent a photo of her father, the widower robbed of $400,000. More voices poured in, forming a thread of stories descending from the same poisoned vine. David read each message slowly, some with tears running silently down his face. It broke him, and strangely, it also rebuilt him. One night, the three of us sat on the balcony. The sun was sinking behind the buildings, painting them in soft orange and gold. The air smelled of warm concrete and jasmine from a neighbor's window box. Emma leaned against me, tired from the day, Buddy half asleep on her lap. David stood by the railing, arms crossed loosely, looking out at the quiet world below. There was something different in him now, less tension, more truth, more humanity. After a long stretch of silence, he turned toward me. "Mom," he said softly, "how did you stay so strong through all this?" I studied him, the lines around his eyes, the slump of his shoulders, the sincerity in his expression. He wasn't asking out of admiration. He was asking out of bewilderment, out of a longing to understand how someone could walk through the kind of fire he had created and still stand tall on the other side. "I would have fallen apart," he whispered. I almost did. I reached out and touched his hand gently. His fingers closed around mine, hesitant at first, then with growing certainty. I didn't stay strong, I told him. Not all the time. Some nights I cried until I couldn't breathe. Some mornings I didn't want to get out of bed. Strength isn't about never breaking, David. It's about what you choose to do after you break. He blinked rapidly, his throat tightening. Then how did you keep going? I looked at Emma, her chest rising softly as she slept against my side. I looked at Buddy, snoring lightly with his little paws twitching. And then I looked at my son, the man who had caused me pain, the boy who had once clung to my hand, the human being standing before me, trying to rebuild himself one honest breath at a time. I kept going, I said, because I still believed there was something worth saving. In myself. In you. In this family. Maybe that belief was fragile. Maybe it flickered. But it never went out. He breathed in sharply, wiping at his eyes with the heel of his hand. Mom, I don't deserve you. I smiled, not with triumph or pity, but with a quiet, weary love. You're not supposed to earn your mother's love, I whispered. You're supposed to grow into it. David leaned his forehead against the balcony railing, shoulders shaking as he cried softly, letting years of pride and pain unravel. The sun slipped fully below the horizon, leaving only the glow of the city lights around us. The night felt soft, forgiving. A beginning disguised as an ending. Inside, the apartment waited, warm, lived in, imperfect, and filled with the fragile, beautiful work of rebuilding. And for the first time in a very long time, we weren't doing any of it alone. Christmas used to feel like a season meant for other families, ones with matching sweaters and perfect trees, and carefully wrapped gifts placed under glowing lights. After everything that had happened, I expected the holiday to remain bittersweet forever, marked by memories of humiliation and betrayal. But life has a strange way of mending itself quietly, like a crack in glass that somehow stops spreading and begins to hold light in new, unexpected ways. 1 year later, my apartment smelled of cinnamon and slow-roasted vegetables. The tree was small, barely 4 feet tall, and decorated mostly with ornaments Emma had made at school. A crooked paper angel, a glittery star with too much glue, and a clay paw print Buddy had stepped on accidentally, and she insisted on turning into art. The modest dining table was pressed against the window to make room for extra chairs. Nothing matched. Nothing was fancy, but everything felt right. David and Emma now lived in the unit next door. Sometimes I still paused in the hallway when I heard their laughter through the wall, amazed by how life had rearranged itself into something softer, quieter, and infinitely more real. Emma bounced into my apartment first, cheeks flushed from excitement, wearing a red sweater with a reindeer whose antlers lit up when she pressed a button. She carried a small box wrapped in silver paper under her arm. "Grandma, Christmas dinner is ready." And look, she tugged my hand, pulling me toward the table she had set herself. "I saved the special seat for you." The place of honor wasn't grand. Just a chair with a little paper crown taped to the back and a placemat she had drawn with crayons, me, Emma, Buddy, and David holding hands. In the corner she had written, "Family Forever." My breath caught. "Emma, this is beautiful." She grinned, basking in the praise. "I wanted you to sit where everyone can see you. Daddy says you're the heart of Christmas." I swallowed hard. For years I had been an afterthought, something tolerated, used, or pushed aside. To be placed at the head of this little table. It was healing in a way I hadn't known I still needed. Buddy waddled in next, tail thumping, wearing a tiny green bow that he kept trying to chew off. He immediately settled at my feet, sighing with deep contentment, as if declaring that the festivities could now begin. David stepped forward with a dish of roasted chicken. He looked healthier now, less frantic, the tension gone from his shoulders. He had rebuilt himself piece by piece over the past year, not out of pride, but out of purpose. When he lifted his glass, his voice shook slightly. "To Mom," he said, glancing around the table, waiting until everyone grew quiet. "To the woman who taught me that true wealth isn't something you keep in banks or offices. It's family and integrity. And the courage to start over when you've nearly destroyed everything." The room fell silent. Not heavy, just full. Full of understanding, full of shared history, full of gratitude. Tom arrived with his wife and teenage sons, bringing a pie still warm from the oven. They hugged me like family, not like clients or business partners. Sarah stopped by with a gift bag, saying she could only stay 10 minutes but ended up staying an hour. Laughing so hard at one of Emma's jokes, she nearly spilled her hot chocolate. Even Mr. Patterson came wearing a garish Christmas tie covered in blinking lights, complaining loudly about it while secretly loving the attention it brought him. We crowded around the table, elbows bumping, plates touching, all of us laughing at things that weren't even particularly funny. There was no competition, no showmanship, no tension, just warmth. Real, unadorned warmth. Midway through dessert, Emma slid the silver-wrapped box toward me. "This is your present," she said, fidgeting with excitement. "I made it myself." I opened it slowly, savoring the moment. Inside was a photo album, thick and overflowing with memories. On the cover, she had written in blue marker, "Grandma Ramona and Buddy's Year of Adventures." My hands trembled as I turned the pages. Buddy at her school's fall festival, wearing little wings, and Emma at her soccer game, both of us cheering while Buddy slept beside us. David smiling timidly at the edges of every event, always present, always trying. Buddy dressed like a pumpkin for Halloween. Me holding Emma's hand at her art show, her eyes glowing with pride. Even pictures from quiet evenings, movie nights, cookie baking disasters, Buddy stealing rolls from the counter. Every photo captured something I'd thought I had lost forever. Us. A real family. Not perfect, not painless, but whole. I looked up, swallowing emotion. "Emma, this is one of the most precious gifts I've ever received," she beamed, hugging Buddy tightly. "I wanted you to remember all the happy things, not the old sad ones." Her words carried more wisdom than she knew. David cleared his throat gently. "Mom, I have something too." He reached into a folder and placed several official-looking documents in front of me. "I changed the trust, legally, permanently. Emma inherits everything someday. And if anything ever happens, you're her guardian." The room went still again. This wasn't money. It wasn't power. It wasn't revenge. It was trust. Pure and fragile and profound. "I want her to grow up with your values," David whispered. "Not the ones I got lost in." My eyes burned. My heart pulsed with something indescribably tender. The greatest revenge had never been the legal victory, or the money recovered, or the guilty verdicts. The real victory was sitting right here, my family, restored not by force, but by truth and humility and the quiet work of healing. Buddy shifted at my feet, snoring softly, grounding the moment with his simple, unwavering presence. As I looked around the table, the mismatched chairs, the imperfect decorations, the faces I loved, I remembered something my late husband used to tell me whenever I doubted myself. "Real power isn't forcing people to respect you," he'd say gently. "It's knowing your worth and never settling for less." For years, I had forgotten that. But tonight, surrounded by the people who mattered, I felt it again, strong, steady, and fully mine. Emma tugged my sleeve. "Grandma, will you tell the story of how Buddy helped save Christmas?" I laughed softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Well," I began, settling into my chair as everyone leaned closer. "It all started when I learned that love without respect is just manipulation, and family without honor is just people sharing a name." Their faces glowed in the soft light. Buddy snored louder, as if urging me on. And I told the story not just of Buddy, or betrayal, or justice, but of how sometimes the miracle isn't in what you gain, but in what you reclaim. As the night stretched on, laughter spilling into the warm December air, I realized something simple and true. Christmas had finally come home. And if you felt moved by this journey, by its healing, its humanity, and its hopes, subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next story that might touch your heart too.